First time you saw like a DJI drone drop a bomb in Iraq and Syria when ISIS was like doing that, were you just like, I've been proven correct, or like what was your thought?
That's when I kind of realized that there was a bit of a disparity between the really, really high tech and the right tech. Like, thing just does the job in the most simplest of ways. And I think that was the kind of penny dropping moment where you just saw, this is going to be big. And
oh my God, the world is going to change so fast, and we've spent billions, tens of billions of dollars on RF jammers. It's unbelievable how much money they're spending on their military because they view this as an existential threat, right? This is Dan Meiji, CEO and co-founder of Firestorm, and this week on the Drone Wars podcast, I'm joined by Karl Eze from Point Zenith. He's flown all the way from the lovely UK to join us in California and talk all things autonomous systems. Karl, how are we doing today?
I'm good.
Thanks for joining us in sunny San Diego.
First time here.
Yeah, first time here. Probably gonna never leave. That's what happens when a lot of people come from England, right?
Yeah, it's got sun.
Yeah, I know. It's got sun and people are happy. Amazing.
All good.
And I'm sure the accent goes over well with people as well.
Yeah, I sound like Harry Potter.
I know.
Can you do?
Harry Potter. That's about all. That's the only good British accent I can do, and I only lived there for 2 years, so
Keep working on it.
Yeah, bear with me here. Okay, so Karl and I met at a DIU conference, I think last year. We were in somewhere out in Eastern Europe, maybe Poland. And we've stayed in touch since then. And, Karl, you got a pretty interesting background. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you became one of the drone wizards of the UK?
What a title. So my background is mainly military. I did 12 years in the British Army full time. So initially starting artillery and did the operational tours, Iraq, Afghanistan and the like. But then they realized I had a science degree.
Ooh, smart man.
But not anything useful in biology, like genetics, but it was close enough.
Yeah.
So they started pushing me towards defense technology. So first I was the signals officer for my unit. And then they put me onto a course at the Defence Academy of the UK in battle space technology. Did that, got into the weeds of information superiority. But at the time...
What year was this, by the way?
This had been 2015.
Okay.
Yeah, 2015. So, but then completely coincidentally, I went to a wedding and I met a guy who introduced himself as the #1 drone investor in the world.
Wow.
And then the rest is history. And he said, have you ever heard of drone racing? I was like, no, it sounds stupid. Yeah. But then, I was impressed by meeting him. I kind of got home, started looking at drones. Yeah. It was around about the time, like the Rotor Riot, the original guys, and looking at the Left Behind video and things like that, and just saw it and just got captivated by it. And so I started looking around, looking how to get the components, started building them. And actually, it's quite early in the scene in the UK. So it was very small, met everyone. Yeah. And it's only really when you start to meet the community, you go and you learn how to build, you learn how to put things together, you learn how to just do everything, really.
Was there like a hub where everyone kind of got together?
So I was in London at the time, and there was a place called the Hack Space. And it had a smaller group called London Aerospace.
Oh, cool.
And people who were into FPV, and just went from there.
Very cool.
And so, I hadn't soldiered since I was at high school. And then, so got back into soldering, got back into that, and just meeting a really supportive community just kept everyone together. And then I got into the racing side of things. Right. So by Christmas of 2015, I'd built my first, when you see something you've built fly, it's quite a buzz.
Yeah, it's like your child's being born or something.
Yeah, exactly. And then I went to a couple of races in the new year. Then I just got really into it. So every weekend I was racing nationally, very much middle of the pack.
Yep.
Kind of not to set the world on fire by racing, but just really got bitten by the bug. And then it was around about 2016. So I was doing a job going towards the army headquarters, and I had a bit of time in my hands. So I wrote a paper about the military application of FPV and the technology. And this,
unbelievable.
And
8 years ago.
Yeah. And so you kind of realize when I was on a course learning about defense tech, and you look at the warhead on most anti-tank guided weapons under a kilogram shaped charge, that can easily be put on a drone. And you start to see those links, and you start to see what's coming. And And actually, it's almost like what's then come forth over the last kind of 8 years, just being a playing out of the next logical step each time when you look at what's going on. You're seeing it all unfolding in front of you. So
first time you saw like a DJI drone drop a bomb in Iraq and Syria when ISIS was like doing that, were you just like, I've been proven correct, or like, what was your thought?
Yeah, because it was an interesting one, because around the time, is when they were getting the old jam jars with the grenades inside and just like some hooks rocking it over.
Yeah.
And that's when I kind of realized that there was a bit of a disparity between the really, really high tech and the right tech. Like thing just does the job in the most simplest of ways. And I think that was the kind of penny dropping moment where you just saw, no, this is going to be big. And I remember having some conversations with people and looking at what I saw as being red lines. And the main things I looked at is, at the time, that ISIS weren't doing like what we now call FPV, but, improvised, manual, like kind of craft. And I said that's going to be a red line because it's got more of a capability than just these kind of off the shelf. And so the second red line is looking at automation, looking at SLAM, so simultaneous localization mapping, those kind of things. But even if you look now, the kind of pixel lock, the ability to forego any effects of jamming in order to get their mission done, that was another red line.
Drone Wars is recorded from Firestorm's global HQ in San Diego. From our custom-built studio inside one of our hero products, a modular industrial-grade manufacturing facility designed to be deployed anywhere in the world within 24 hours for on-demand drone production. Each week on the podcast, we bring you cutting-edge insights from top industry leaders, sharing the breakthroughs and technologies they're working on, the hard lessons they've learned, and bold predictions that they have for the next 5 to 10 years in autonomous systems and advanced manufacturing. Enjoying the show so far? Then be sure you like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Now, back to the show.
Let's talk about that for a second. I don't think it gets enough play. I think the folks in the space understand how this is going to affect all of our RF-based counter UAS systems, but a lot of people don't. So explain how, like, what's the pixel lock technology allowing people to do?
Yeah, so fundamentally, we use radio frequencies to control these kind of craft and guide them to target. I always call an FPV drone like a poor man's smart weapon, effectively, because you don't have much autonomy, but you have lots of human skill.
Right.
But with a lot of the countering is using a lot of radio frequency jamming to basically block out the command signal.
Right.
And so that creates a problem that you can't control the drone or you can't see the video and therefore it crashes. But with the pixel lock, it's effectively utilizing very, very low power onboard computes. Think Raspberry Pi. And instead of really doing anything too whizzy, like machine learning libraries, like being able to recognize a tank or the model tank, no, it's literally, I recognize the pixels in front of, and I'm going to keep those pixels in the front and center of the screen until they get really big, and just kind of follow it until it kind of gets very, very big, and you're just guiding something towards a target. So this means that you have a very easy way of just doing some very useful guidance that doesn't rely on radio frequency. So, jamming becomes irrelevant.
Right.
And hence a lot of the ways we're countering at the moment becomes irrelevant.
I know. I mean, first defense tech company I started, Citadel, that was our whole thing, right? Jamming RF. And when I looked at when we saw the first signs of this popping up in the open source community about 12 months ago, it was like, oh my God, the world is going to change so fast. And we've spent billions, tens of billions of dollars on RF jammers that, there will be some use, but now we have to start thinking about layered solutions.
But even then, when you flick on its head and you start looking at the homing on jam, and you turn the RF jammer into its own worst enemy.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. I mean, and we've seen that. I mean, it's different in Iraq or Afghanistan, right? Where you're not facing armies of PhDs on the other side of the line, right?
Yeah.
But like, exactly, home on jam and then boom, artillery shell there in 30 seconds or less.
Yeah, exactly.
That's terrifying.
Yeah.
Right. And it causes a complete rethink of how everything has to be done. So maybe like go high level for us. What are some of the really interesting, and interesting can be taken in a lot of different ways. It can be scary. It can be unique. What are some of the interesting lessons that, you're learning out of Ukraine?
I think when you draw on the tactics, techniques, and procedures, I think those are the really big things. So things which look obvious and look like common sense, but it's that kind of common sense done at scale.
Yeah.
And so how do you educate and train your entire force to be used to being on the receiving end of technology where they've never had to do so?
Right.
And it's even, I think it's one of the videos you released the other day, just looking at someone, urinating in the woods and the thermal signature that's created on a tree by that. And there's things that you just take for granted,
right?
But you can no longer, and you want to learn from the mistakes of others.
Yeah.
So it's actually learning and just trying to condense all of that knowledge, all that know-how, all of that, in the face of battle development, and just, kind of take the good and understand how you can basically learn from other people's mistakes, really.
Yeah. I mean, and if you're Ukrainian or Russian, you at least have people who've survived facing these things, even in a very fast moving environment. It's going to be totally different putting folks who are used to maneuver warfare.
Yeah.
We're going to see, it'll be really interesting to see how the North Koreans do.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's a super steep learning curve here.
No, definitely. Even when you look at, from my military background, when you look at forming up, we used to talk about assembly areas, forming up points.
Yeah.
And then they become very big vulnerabilities.
It's incredible, right?
Yeah.
It's so many videos of like Shark UAV pinpointing where an assembly area is, and next thing you know, there's HIMARS or loitering munitions just peppering it, And
it's just the time scales of how things move. And you don't have the luxury of time on the battle space anymore. You've got to stay current, you've got to stay moving. And actually it's changing the way in which maneuver happens as well. So, and I always find it really interesting to look at almost a case study of the Kursk incursion by the Ukrainians.
Yeah.
And just looking at the amount of shaping of the battle space they had to do beforehand. So everyone always talks about, is this replacing that? Is this going to be doing that? No, everything exists in and once at the same time. It's how you layer them. It's how you kind of work in consort. So in the way I see it, it's another layer of the kind of combined arms maneuver you have to think about. You have to think more about the RF, but more about the jamming, more about blinding the ISR drones, all these things.
And so people who don't know, explain what the Ukrainians did to like have that breakout in Kursk. It's pretty interesting.
So it's really interesting so far as effectively the Russians' use of the intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance drones, it very much limits maneuver because, if you're going to get on a road or get on a track with vehicles, you're going to be spotted. If you're going to be spotted, you're going to be intercepted. And that's a problem. So it's very much shaping the battle space for weeks. I think you looked at the fact that utilizing very cheap FPV drones to then counter and just, turn them into HITARs and just hitting a lot of the ISR drones. But then if you do it enough and you have a lot of the network, which enables you to detect, track and intercept, then that actually starts having a really big impact where all of a sudden you're then getting to a stage where you're blinding a large majority of the drones up there over a good period of time. And if you do enough of it, and if you're using something which takes, a couple of hours to build versus something which takes considerably more time, something which is less than $1,000 or in the low thousands of dollars versus something which is a magnitude more expensive, you're going to run out of those surveillance drones faster than I'm going to run out of FPV. And so that was the case. Then utilizing that with jamming and the rest of it, you have to create that conditions, almost like create that kind of blind spot. Yeah. And you just sneak those tanks through.
Yeah, it was very interesting. They basically blinded the Russians for maybe a day or two. Yeah. You know what I mean? And they did a great job too, not telling everybody what they were doing until
But that's enough. It's creating those fleeting opportunities where then you can utilize more traditional assets like the armor and things like that.
Thanks for listening to the Drone Wars podcast. Each week, we bring you fascinating conversations with leaders shaping the future of air, sea, land, and space technologies. Catch new episodes every Tuesday wherever podcasts can be found. Until then, we'll see you next time.